The darkness of space held no mercy for the dying. Commander Kelris stood on the bridge of his failing ship and watched the status displays flicker with warnings he could no longer fix. Behind him, 17 vessels limped through the void, carrying the last remnants of the Velkar people. 3 million souls, all that remained of a civilization that once numbered in the billions. The Velkar had been artists and philosophers, builders of crystalline cities that sang in the wind, composers of harmonies that could move stone. Their world had been beautiful once. Then their star had died, and with it everything they had ever known. The evacuation had been chaos. Families separated in the rush to the ships, treasures of 10,000 years abandoned. They had fled with whatever they could carry, hoping to find sanctuary somewhere in the endless dark. That was 4 months ago. Since then, the fleet had wandered through uncharted space searching for any sign of habitable worlds. Their ships were never meant for such long journeys. Systems failed daily. The food synthesizers produced less each week. Life support struggled to maintain breathable atmosphere. Children cried from hunger. The elderly died quietly in their sleep, too tired to continue fighting. Kelris had watched his people's hope fade like their dying sun. The council meetings had become shorter, the debates more desperate. Some suggested they split the fleet, giving the younger generation better odds of survival. Others proposed landing on any marginally habitable rock they could find, even if it meant a slow death instead of a quick one. No good options remained, only varying degrees of extinction. Then the sensors detected something, a yellow star, similar to their own lost sun, multiple planets in the habitable zone, and most importantly, signs of advanced technology, radio transmissions, orbital structures, energy signatures that spoke of a thriving civilization. The council had argued for 2 days. Some feared they would be seen as invaders. Others worried this civilization might be hostile, might see desperate refugees as easy prey. But they had no choice left. Their ships had weeks of life support remaining, maybe less. This was their last chance. Kelris gave the order. The fleet changed course toward the Yellow Star system. They were 3 days into their approach when the human ships found them. 6 sleek vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel, surrounding the Velkar fleet in a defensive formation. They were beautiful ships, aggressive in design, bristling with weapons that tracked the refugee vessels with obvious intent. Kelris's communications officer managed to establish a connection. The translation software was crude, pieced together from the radio signals they had intercepted, but it worked well enough to convey basic meaning. The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything the Velkar had seen before. Smooth skin instead of scales, hair instead of crests, eyes positioned forward like a predator. The human wore a military uniform and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ship Defender," the human said. His voice was measured, cautious. "You have entered the Sol system without authorization. State your intentions." Kelris stepped forward, trying to appear as non-threatening as a 2-meter-tall reptilian could manage. "I am Commander Kelris of the Velkar Exodus Fleet. We come in peace and in desperation. Our star died. Our world is gone. We carry the last survivors of our people. We seek only temporary refuge, resources to repair our ships, and permission to settle on an uninhabited world if you have one to spare." He watched Morrison's expression change as the translation came through. The human's eyes moved past Kelris, taking in the bridge behind him. Kelris knew what he saw. Exhausted crew members working at damaged consoles, emergency lights flickering, the visible signs of a people at the end of their strength. "Stand by," Morrison said, and the connection cut to a waiting screen. The hours that followed were agony. The human ships maintained their positions, weapons still locked on the Velkar fleet. Kelris ordered all weapon systems powered down, broadcast their surrender codes, anything to show they meant no harm. His people waited in their ships holding their children, praying to gods that seemed to have abandoned them long ago. On Earth, decisions were being made that would determine the fate of both species. The Global Unity Council convened an emergency session. Admiral Lisa Bennett, commander of Earth's defensive fleet, briefed the assembly on what they knew. 17 ships heavily damaged. Energy signatures consistent with civilian vessels, not military. 3 million life signs, mostly showing signs of malnutrition and stress. Their story checked out as far as anyone could verify. The debate raged for 3 days. Some council members saw opportunity. a chance to establish first contact with an advanced alien species, to gain new technologies and perspectives. Others saw only risk. What if this was a trick? What if the refugees carried diseases? What if they were the vanguard of an invasion force, playing on human sympathy to gain a foothold in the system? President Nathan Cross listened to all arguments. He reviewed the data, consulted with experts, considered the implications. But in the end, his decision came down to something simpler than politics or strategy. It came down to what it meant to be human, to be civilized, to have the power to help and the choice of whether to use it. On the third day, Captain Morrison received new orders. He opened a channel to the Velkar fleet, and this time his expression was different. Not exactly warm. Humans weren't built for that kind of emotional display, but something softer than military caution. Commander Kelris, I've been authorized to extend an offer from the people of Earth. We're prepared to grant you more than temporary refuge. We're offering you a home. Kelris felt his legs weaken. Around him, his bridge crew stopped what they were doing, hardly daring to believe what they were hearing. Morrison continued, We have a planet called Mars. We've been terraforming it for 2 centuries. It's not fully habitable yet by our standards, but our scientists believe your atmospheric technology could accelerate the process significantly. If you're willing to work with us to share knowledge and labor, we can make Mars livable for your people within a year. You can stay, build a colony, live. The translation software couldn't quite capture the emotion in Kelris's response. The Velkar didn't cry the way humans did, but his body language spoke volumes. He pressed his clawed hand against the screen as if he could reach through it and touch this miraculous human who offered life when death seemed certain. We accept, Kelris managed. We accept with gratitude beyond words. We will work. We will share everything we know. We will prove ourselves worthy of this gift. Morrison nodded. Then welcome to the Sol system. Welcome home. The Velkar fleet entered Mars orbit under escort. Human engineers swarmed over the refugee ships assessing damage, beginning repairs. Supply vessels brought food, medicine, materials. For the first time in months, Velkar children ate until they were full. The sick received treatment. The dying were pulled back from the edge. Kelris stood in the observation deck of his ship, looking down at the red planet that would become New Velkara. His people had lost everything, had fled across the stars with nothing but their lives and their hope. And they had found something unexpected in this corner of the galaxy. They had found humans. Below him, shuttles began ferrying the first colonists to the surface. Human and Velkar engineers walked side by side, surveying the land, making plans. 2 species meeting for the first time, beginning the difficult work of building something together. The acceptance ceremony was held on Mars, in a hastily constructed dome that could accommodate both species. President Cross himself attended, along with Admiral Bennett and representatives from every nation on Earth. The Velkar Council stood across from them, still weak from their ordeal but standing tall with renewed dignity. Kelris spoke first, his words translated for the assembled crowd. We came to your star as strangers and refugees. You had every reason to turn us away, to see us as a burden or a threat. Instead, you offered us something we thought lost forever. A future. Children born on Mars will grow up never knowing the despair we felt drifting through the dark. They will know only that when we needed help, humanity answered. This debt can never be repaid, but we will spend our lives trying. Nathan Cross responded with simple words that would be remembered by both species for generations. No debt exists between us. You asked for help. We had the means to give it. That's not charity. That's not politics. That's just what neighbors do. Welcome to Mars. Welcome to the solar system. Build your home. Raise your children. Live in peace. And if you're willing to share your knowledge and culture with us, we'll do the same. That's all we ask. The ceremony ended with a gesture that would become symbolic of human-Velkar relations. Jake Morrison, still in his military uniform, approached Kelris and extended his hand. The Velkar commander looked at it, understanding the intent if not the exact custom. He reached out and clasped Morrison's hand, careful not to let his claws dig into the human's softer skin. Thank you, Kelris said in halting English, the first words he had learned in the human language. You're welcome, Morrison replied, and meant it. The first night on Mars, Velkar families huddled in temporary shelters and looked up at the stars. For months, those stars had been cold and hostile, a reminder of their exile. 6 months had passed since the Velkar fleet entered Mars orbit, and the red planet had transformed in ways that stunned even the most optimistic projections. New Velcara sprawled across the Valles Marineris Canyon system, a hybrid city that combined human engineering with Velcar design principles. Domes of human construction protected atmospheric processors of Velcar origin. Streets laid out in human grids featured Velcar crystalline sculptures that hummed softly in the manufactured wind. Lieutenant Danny Porter walked through the colony's central district, marveling at how normal it had all become. 6 months ago, the idea of working alongside reptilian aliens would have seemed like science fiction. Now he passed Velcar engineers heading to their shifts without a second glance. He had a meeting with Thesix, his Velcar counterpart in the Propulsion Research Division, and he was running late. He found Thesix in the lab they shared, surrounded by holographic displays showing power flow diagrams. The Velcar turned at Danny's approach, his crest rising in what Danny had learned meant friendly acknowledgement. "You're late," Thesix said in accented but clear English. The Velcar had proven remarkably quick at learning human languages. "Traffic," Danny replied with a grin. "Some Velcar driver doesn't understand human traffic signals. Some human engineer doesn't understand Velcar navigation patterns," Thesix countered, but his tone was amused. Over 6 months of working together, they had developed an easy friendship based on shared passion for their work and mutual respect for each other's abilities. They were developing a hybrid propulsion system that combined human fusion drive technology with Velcar energy shielding. The theory was sound. If they could create a stable field that redirected exotic particles rather than absorbing them, they could achieve acceleration profiles impossible with conventional drives. It might even lead to faster-than-light travel, something humanity had never achieved, and the Velcar had lost the technology for when their homeworld died. "I've been running simulations all night," Thesix said, manipulating the holographic displays. The particle flow remains stable up to 0.8 light speed. Then the field collapse becomes inevitable. "We need a way to reinforce the field structure at higher velocities." Danny studied the data, his mind working through the problem. This was what he loved about working with Thesix. The Velcar thought in patterns and harmonies, seeing connections Danny's more linear human thinking sometimes missed. Together they covered each other's blind spots. "What if we don't reinforce it?" Danny suggested. "What if we let it collapse and reform in a controlled cycle? Pulse the field instead of maintaining it constantly." Thesix's crest flared wider, a sign of excitement, a rhythm rather than a sustained note. "Yes, that could work. The energy requirements would be lower, the stress distributed across time rather than sustained pressure." They dove into the calculations, hours passing unnoticed as they refined the concept. This was the magic of human Velcar cooperation. Different perspectives, different ways of thinking, combining to solve problems neither could tackle alone. Across the colony, similar collaborations flourished. In the medical center, Dr. Maya Collins worked with Velcar physician Vexel to understand the biological similarities and differences between their species. Maya had been shocked to discover that despite their reptilian appearance, the Velcar shared significant genetic markers with Earth life. "It's impossible," Maya said, staring at the DNA comparison on her screen. "These marker sequences are too specific to be coincidental. It's like we share a common ancestor, but that makes no sense. Your species evolved on a planet dozens of light years away." Vexal examined the data with his characteristically calm demeanor. Velcar didn't express emotion as visibly as humans, but Maya had learned to read the subtle signs. The slight tilt of his head indicated deep thought. Perhaps life in the galaxy shares a common origin. Perhaps the building blocks of biology spread through space long ago, seeding many worlds. "Panspermia," Maya said. "We've theorized about it, but never had proof. This could revolutionize our understanding of life itself." The research had practical applications too. Understanding their genetic compatibility allowed Maya's team to develop medical treatments that worked for both species. Velcar children received vaccines adapted from human immunology. Human colonists benefited from Velcar regenerative therapies that accelerated healing. But the cooperation went beyond science and technology. Cultural exchange programs brought Velcar musicians to Earth concert halls. Their performances were unlike anything humans had created, compositions that worked in harmonics humans could barely hear, music that seemed to vibrate in the bones. In New York, a Velcar composer named Heskel performed a piece called Requiem for a Lost Star, and critics declared it the most moving musical experience of the century. Human artists traveled to Mars to learn Velkar crystalline sculpture, an art form that shaped glass-like material into structures that sang when the wind touched them. The sculptures dotted New Velkara's streets, each one unique. Each one a collaboration between human and Velkar artists trying to blend their aesthetic traditions. Schools connected via holographic link allowed human and Velkar children to learn together. The young adapted fastest, as they always did. Human kids learned to read Velkar crest movements as communication. Velkar youngsters picked up human idioms and slang. They couldn't breathe the same air comfortably yet. The atmospheric requirements still too different. But they studied together, played games together, formed friendships that transcended species. Jake Morrison, promoted to commander after the successful integration of the Velkar, watched these developments with satisfaction. He spent much of his time shuttling between Earth and Mars, coordinating the ongoing colonization efforts. The Velkar had proven themselves invaluable partners. Their atmospheric processors had accelerated Mars's terraforming by decades. Their biological expertise helped adapt Earth crops to Martian soil. Their energy shielding technology had applications in everything from spacecraft to weather control. Trade routes expanded throughout the solar system. Joint human Velkar expeditions explored the outer planets with newfound efficiency. A permanent research station went up on Titan, crewed by both species studying the methane oceans and bizarre chemistry of Saturn's largest moon. Jupiter's moons yielded mineral wealth that funded further expansion. Admiral Lisa Bennett oversaw this expansion with a military eye, always thinking about security, about defense. Earth's fleet had grown significantly since the Velkar arrival. The threat of encountering hostile aliens had gone from theoretical to very real. If the Velkar existed, who else was out there? The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and potentially more dangerous, but there were no threats. The months passed peacefully. Prosperity grew. Both species thrived in ways neither had alone. Humanity gained access to technologies they would have taken centuries to develop independently. The Velkar gained the resources and safety to rebuild their civilization. In New Velkara's government center, Kelris worked alongside human administrators to manage the growing colony. He had been elected leader of the Velkar settlement, a role he hadn't sought but couldn't refuse. His people needed guidance as they built their new home. He sat in meetings with Nathan Cross discussing expansion plans, resource allocation, integration challenges. The human president had become something of a friend, as much as leaders of different species could be friends. They shared the burden of responsibility, the weight of making decisions that affected millions. "Your people are thriving," Nathan said during one such meeting. "Population growth is up. Health indices are excellent. Economic integration is proceeding smoothly. I'd call this a success story." Kelris agreed, but something troubled him, a weight he carried that grew heavier each day, a secret that sat like poison in his stomach. He had lied to humanity, not directly, not with words, but by omission, by letting them believe a story that wasn't quite true. The Velkar star hadn't died naturally. It had been murdered, and the murderers knew where the Velkar had fled. He should tell them. He knew he should. But fear held his tongue. Fear that humanity would see the Velkar differently if they knew the truth. Fear that humans would realize they had invited danger into their home. Fear that the generosity that saved his people would turn to resentment. So he said nothing. He smiled and discussed trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. He buried his guilt and hoped the past would stay buried with it. Deep in space, at the edge of the solar system, a Velkar monitoring station detected something unusual. The station was part of the early warning network the Velkar had helped humanity establish, sensors watching for approaching ships or spatial anomalies. For months, the stations had reported nothing but routine cosmic background noise. The operator on duty, a young Velkar named Shinthal, almost missed it. The signature was faint, barely distinguishable from normal space, but the pattern recognition software flagged it, and Zinthal's blood went cold when he saw what it had found. Energy signatures consistent with faster-than-light travel. Multiple sources, ships approaching the system. Not explorers. Not merchants. The power readings were wrong for peaceful vessels. These were... The Zerthak fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like predators from the dark. their ships bristling with weapons that had broken countless civilizations before. War Master Krell surveyed the yellow star system with satisfaction. The prey had settled in nicely, even brought friends. 2 species to conquer for the price of 1 journey. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strong survived, and they had carried that philosophy to the stars. The Zerthak Dominion controlled hundreds of systems, dominated dozens of species. They were masters of war, conquerors without peer. This would be routine. He opened a communication channel to the inner system, broadcasting his message in all known languages. The translation software would handle the rest. Attention inhabitants of this star system. The Velkar are property of the Zerthak Dominion, claimed through right of conquest. You have 7 days to surrender these refugees or be classified as enemies of the Dominion. Choose wisely. On Earth, in the emergency council chambers, Nathan Cross listened to the message 3 times. Each time it got worse. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair hard enough to hurt. Right of conquest, he repeated slowly. They destroyed the Velkar homeworld deliberately. Admiral Bennett stood at the tactical display, her face carved from stone. The star didn't go supernova naturally. They killed it. Stellar engineering on a scale we can't even imagine. They murdered an entire solar system. The revelation hit the council like a physical blow. The Velkar hadn't fled a natural disaster. They had fled genocide. And humanity had given shelter to survivors of that genocide without knowing what enemies they invited. "Where's Kelris?" Nathan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "On his way," Bennett replied. He requested an emergency meeting an hour ago, before the Zerthak message arrived. Kelris arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by human security. He looked at the assembled leaders and saw their expressions, read the anger and betrayal there. They knew, of course they knew. The Zerthak had made sure of that. "I came to confess," he said without preamble. "I should have told you from the beginning. I was afraid. Afraid you would turn us away if you knew we brought danger. Afraid you would see us as the threat we represented. I have no excuse. I endangered your people through my cowardice." Nathan stood, and for a moment Kelris thought the human might strike him. Instead, Nathan walked to the viewport overlooking Earth, his back to the Velkar commander. "How many?" Nathan asked quietly. "How many what? How many of your people did they kill?" Kelris closed his eyes. 15 billion. Our entire species except those lucky enough to be on the evacuation fleet when the star died. They gave us 3 days' warning, said we could surrender and be enslaved or resist and be exterminated. We chose to flee instead. I thought we had escaped. I thought they wouldn't follow. I was wrong. The room stayed silent. Finally, Jake Morrison spoke up. "What are they? Why do this?" "The Zerthak believe might makes right," Kelris explained. "They conquer species, absorb their technology, enslave survivors. They've built an empire spanning 300 systems. They're coming for us now, and they won't stop at the Velkar. If you surrender us, they'll see weakness. They'll return for you eventually." "Well, we're not surrendering you," Nathan said flatly, turning from the window. "So that's settled." "Mr. President," one of the council members interjected, "with all respect, we need to discuss this. 47 warships. Our analysts say we have less than 12% chance of victory. We're talking about potential extinction of the human species." "I don't care about the odds," Nathan replied. "I care about what we are as a species, what we stand for. If we give up the Velkar to save ourselves, what are we? What right do we have to call ourselves civilized?" The debate raged for hours. Economic advisors calculated the cost of war. Military analysts presented grim projections. Some delegates argued for diplomacy, for negotiation, for buying time. Others pointed out that species like the Zerthak didn't negotiate. They took or they destroyed. Admiral Bennett waited until the shouting died down, then spoke with the calm authority of someone who had seen combat, who understood war in ways politicians never would. "The military reality is simple. We're outgunned. We'll lose if we fight conventionally, but we don't have to fight conventionally. Humans have a long history of winning against superior odds. We do it by being unpredictable, by refusing to quit, by making victory so expensive that our enemies decide we're not worth the cost." "You're talking about guerrilla warfare," Jake said. "Hit and run, asymmetric tactics. I'm talking about making them bleed," Bennett replied. "Making them regret coming here. Even if we lose, even if we all die, we make sure they lose enough ships that other species under their control see weakness. We spark rebellion in their empire. We make our last stand mean something. Nathan looked at his council, at the faces of men and women who held the fate of Earth in their hands. "Vote," he said simply. "Do we fight or do we surrender the Velkar?" The vote was closer than Kelris would have liked, but it was decisive. 68% voted to fight. Humanity chose war. Nathan addressed both species, his speech broadcast across Earth and Mars, to every human and Velkar in the solar system. He chose his words carefully, knowing they would be remembered regardless of outcome. "We gave the Velkar a home 6 months ago. Today we give them something else. Something we've given each other throughout our long history. In every dark hour when evil seemed unstoppable, we give them defiance. We give them warriors who will stand beside them. We give them allies who refuse to bow. And to the Zerthak Dominion we give you this message. Leave our system within 7 days or face consequences. We will not surrender. We will not submit. You want the Velkar? Come take them. But know that every step you take into our home will cost you blood." The Zerthak response was laughter. Krell found the human bravado amusing. These primitives thought they could threaten the Dominion. He had conquered species more advanced than them. This would be instructive. A lesson in reality. Humanity didn't wait for the 7 days to expire. They prepared for war with the focused intensity that characterized their species when survival was at stake. Shipyards that produced civilian vessels retooled for military production. Manufacturing facilities accelerated output, working triple shifts. Scientists who studied peaceful applications of technology now weaponized their research. Danny and Thesix worked around the clock on their propulsion system. The elegant theory they had developed for exploration became something harsher, more violent. The pulsed field drive that would have enabled peaceful, faster-than-light travel now gave human warships acceleration profiles that defied physics. "It's not ready," Thesix protested as Danny pushed the prototype toward production. "We've only run simulations. No actual tests. It could explode. It could tear the ships apart. Then we build it robust and hope for the best," Danny replied. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from days without sleep. "We don't have time for proper testing. We either use it now or not at all." They installed the drives on 6 ships, the fastest vessels in Earth's fleet. If the drives worked, these ships would be humanity's edge. If they failed, 6 ships would be lost. But doing nothing meant losing everything, so the choice was simple. Maya transformed her medical facilities into battlefield trauma centers. She trained staff on combat triage, on treating injuries from energy weapons and explosive decompression. She requisitioned supplies for mass casualties, knowing she would need them. War meant blood. Her job was to save who she could. The Velkar contributed everything they knew about the Zerthak. Fleet compositions, tactics, weapon capabilities. Kelris met with Bennett daily, sharing intelligence, helping plan Earth's defense. It was little enough to make up for his deception, but it was what he had to give. "They rely on overwhelming firepower and heavy shields," Kelris explained, pointing to tactical displays. "Their doctrine is straightforward. Advance in formation, absorb enemy fire, respond with massive bombardment. They don't adapt well to unconventional tactics because they rarely need to." "Good," Bennett said. "Then we'll be very unconventional." She implemented Operation Hearthguard, a defensive strategy built on mobility, surprise, and the willingness to sacrifice pieces to protect the whole. Earth's fleet would not meet the Zerthak head-on. They would bleed them, ambush them, make every kilometer of solar space cost Zerthak ships. Mines were seeded throughout the outer system, thousands of them, dormant and waiting, each equipped with basic propulsion and target-seeking capability. Human engineers spent 6 days turning empty space into a death trap, missile batteries hidden on moons and asteroids, railgun platforms positioned with perfect firing solutions. Every advantage humanity could create, they created. Every trick they could think of, they prepared. On Mars, the Velkar colony prepared for siege. Civilians moved to underground shelters built into the canyon walls. Supplies were stockpiled. Emergency protocols established. Parents held children and tried to be brave, but they had seen this before. They knew what came next. Jake Morrison took command of the UES Defender, retrofitted with new weapons and one of Danny's experimental drives. His crew trained for. The Zerthak Vanguard crossed Neptune's orbit with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. 8 warships advanced in formation, their sensors sweeping space for human defenses. They detected a small fleet ahead, 5 human destroyers and 3 cruisers, holding position near the ice giant's largest moon. Perfect prey. The Vanguard commander ordered pursuit as the human ships turned and fled. This matched Zerthak intelligence about human psychology. When faced with superior force, they ran, as they should. The Vanguard accelerated, weapons charging, ready to destroy these cowards before moving on to the real target. The human ships led them deeper into Neptune's gravity well, through what sensors identified as an asteroid field. Nothing unusual about that. Neptune's orbit had plenty of debris, except this wasn't debris, and the asteroids weren't asteroids. Admiral Bennett watched from her flagship as the Zerthak ships entered the kill zone. She waited until they were committed, until retreat would be as dangerous as advance. Then she gave the order that would announce humanity's intentions. Activate the field. Throughout the artificial asteroid belt, thousands of dormant mines came to life. Simple weapons, really. Human engineers had built them from spare parts and explosive materials in less than a week. But simple didn't mean ineffective. The mines activated their basic propulsion systems and began seeking targets. The Zerthak detected the threat immediately, but they were already surrounded. Weapons fire lit up the void as the aliens tried to destroy the incoming threats. They got most of them. Zerthak point defense systems were excellent, but thousands of mines meant hundreds got through. The first warship died in a cascade of explosions that overwhelmed its shields. The second survived the initial barrage but took critical damage, its power systems fluctuating. The Vanguard commander realized his mistake and ordered retreat. But human missile boats emerged from hiding positions around Neptune's moons. They launched everything they had. Nuclear warheads streaked toward the Zerthak formation. The alien shields held against most of the nuclear explosions. Zerthak technology was superior, but the radiation and electromagnetic pulses disrupted their sensors. Their formation, precise and coordinated moments ago, became scattered and confused. That's when Jake Morrison and the UES Defender made their move. His ship, equipped with Danny and Thessix's experimental drive, accelerated at impossible speeds. One moment they were behind Neptune. The next they were cutting through the Zerthak formation at velocities that should have been physically impossible. Jake didn't try to destroy ships. That would have been pointless against their heavy armor. Instead, Defender targeted sensors and weapon systems using precision strikes to blind and cripple. The Zerthak ships, designed for straightforward combat, struggled to track a target moving faster than their targeting computers could handle. Engines at 115%, the chief engineer reported. The drive is holding, but it's running hot. Keep it together a little longer, Jake ordered. One more pass. Defender screamed through the formation again. Lasers cutting into exposed weapon ports, missiles striking damaged sections. Behind them, 2 more ships with the experimental drives joined the attack, turning the battle into chaos. The Vanguard fought back. They were elite Zerthak warriors trained for combat, experienced in war. They adapted quickly, focusing fire on predicted intercept points rather than trying to track the human ships directly. One destroyer took a direct hit and exploded. A cruiser lost power and began drifting, but the price they paid was devastating. When the 4-hour engagement ended and the surviving Zerthak ships limped away toward their main fleet, they had lost 5 vessels. 3 more were so heavily damaged they could barely maneuver. Jake reviewed the tactical data as Defender moved back to friendly positions. His crew was exhausted but alive. The ship had taken damage but nothing critical, and they had just proven something crucial. Humanity could hurt the Zerthak Dominion. War Master Krell received the Vanguard's report with disbelief that slowly transformed into rage. 5 ships lost, 3 more crippled, against a handful of human vessels? Impossible. His subordinate must have made errors, must have been incompetent, but the data didn't lie. These humans fought unlike any species the Dominion had encountered. They didn't follow standard tactical doctrine. They used tricks, traps, weapons that seemed primitive but proved effective. And they had ships that moved faster than Zerthak sensors could properly track. Krell adjusted his strategy. No more Vanguards, no more testing. The entire fleet would advance together. Overwhelming force that couldn't be stopped by clever tactics. He would crush Mars, destroy the Velkar colony, and show these humans the cost of defiance. The Zerthak fleet moved toward Mars in full formation. 40 ships, the Vanguard losses replaced by reserves. It was an armada capable of breaking worlds. and it came with the full fury of an empire that had never been challenged successfully. Human defensive satellites and orbital weapons platforms opened fire as the fleet entered Mars orbit. Missiles and railgun rounds streaked toward the advancing ships. The Zirthak shields absorbed the damage, their point defense systems shooting down most incoming weapons. A few hits got through scorching armor but causing no critical damage. The aliens began bombarding New Velkara. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking the colony's shields. The Velkar shields held, but not forever. Each hit weakened them. Each bombardment brought the colony closer to destruction. On Mars, in underground shelters, Velkar civilians huddled together. They had seen this before. Watched their homeworld die from orbit. Now it was happening again, and they were helpless to stop it. Kelris stood in the colony's command center, watching the bombardment, feeling history repeat itself. He had failed his people twice. Failed to save their original home. Failed to find refuge that didn't bring death with it. Then the second wave of humanity's defense activated, and Kelris realized he had underestimated his adopted species again. 3 experimental railgun platforms, hidden in the asteroid belt with perfect firing solutions on Mars orbit, launched their payloads. These weren't ordinary weapons. Human scientists had pushed the boundaries of physics to create them. Projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, each one carrying kinetic energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons. The first projectile hit a Zirthak battleship dead center. The shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons and deflect conventional projectiles, simply didn't have time to react. The projectile was moving too fast, carrying too much momentum. It punched through the shields, through the armor, through the entire ship. The battleship came apart in an explosion visible from Mars's surface. The second and third shots scored similar kills. 2 more capital ships died before the Zirthak fleet could even identify the threat. War Master Krell watched 3 of his best ships die in seconds and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. These humans had weapons the Dominion had never encountered. Technology that shouldn't be possible from such a primitive species. He ordered immediate retreat from Mars orbit, but the human fleet had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. Ships emerged from behind Mars's moons from the planet's shadow, surrounding the Zirthak formation. What followed was the kind of close-range slugfest that neither side wanted, but both committed to. Ships died in explosions that lit up the Martian sky. The Zirthak had superior firepower and stronger shields. The humans had desperation and the knowledge that if they lost, everyone they loved would die. Danny Porter's ship, the experimental cruiser Pioneer, took a direct hit that severed the portside weapons array. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space. The crew fought to maintain control as systems failed around them. Engineering to bridge. Thessex's voice came over the intercom, strained but steady. The drive is damaged. I can give you one more burst, but it'll probably tear us apart. Danny looked at the tactical display. A Zirthak carrier was launching fighters, preparing to strafe Mars's surface. If those fighters got through, they would bypass the shields, kill civilians directly. Lock course for the carrier, Danny ordered. Everyone to escape pods. Prepare for emergency evacuation. Captain, what are you doing? His executive officer demanded. Buying time. Get to the pods. That's an order. The crew evacuated. Danny waited until the last person was clear, then locked the controls and engaged the experimental drive at maximum power. Pioneer screamed toward the Zirthak carrier, acceleration climbing to impossible levels. Thessex's voice came over the channel one last time. Danny, don't do this. There's another way. Take care of our work, Danny replied. Finish what we started. Tell them I'm sorry I couldn't see it through. He cut the channel and focused on his course. The Zirthak carrier tried to evade, but they were too slow, too massive. Pioneer hit them at a speed that transformed both ships into a ball of plasma. The explosion took out 2 more Zirthak vessels caught in the blast radius. On Mars, Thessex watched his friend die and felt something break inside. The Velkar weren't warriors. Violence was alien to their nature. But watching Danny sacrifice himself for a colony of refugees for a species not his own ignited something new. Rage. The desire to make the enemy pay for every death. 3 months passed in a blur of desperate preparation. The solar system transformed into a fortress as humanity and the Velkar worked together with the intensity of species facing extinction. Shipyards ran at triple capacity. Research facilities that once pursued peaceful science now weaponized every discovery. Children on Earth grew accustomed to seeing warships overhead, understanding that safety came at a price paid in steel and determination. War Master Krell sat in his damaged flagship at the edge of the solar system, waiting for reinforcements that seemed to take forever. His reports to Dominion High Command painted a picture of human capabilities that his superiors refused to believe. Primitive species didn't have relativistic weapons, didn't employ guerrilla tactics in space combat, didn't fight with the ferocity of species that had evolved as apex predators. But they did. And Krell had learned that lesson written in the blood of his warriors. News of the Zerthak defeat spread through the Dominion's territory like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, subject species heard about a successful resistance. Whispers in slave markets spoke of humans who protected refugees. Underground resistance movements on conquered worlds studied the battle reports, learning tactics, finding hope. The Dominion couldn't allow this to continue. They assembled a fleet of 90 warships, 3 times the size of the original force. This fleet would crush humanity and make an example of them, show the galaxy what happened to species that defied the Dominion. But the fleet was 3 months away, and humanity didn't waste those months. Admiral Bennett stood in the command center on Earth, reviewing fleet readiness reports. The numbers looked better than she had dared hope. 40 ships, 20 of them new construction, the rest salvaged and rebuilt from the first battle, all of them equipped with improvements learned from combat. More importantly, they had Danny and Thessix's faster-than-light drive working. The Velkar engineer had poured his grief into the work, refining the design, making it stable. 3 ships now possessed true faster-than-light capability, able to jump short distances instantaneously. It wasn't perfect. The range was limited, but it gave humanity options they had never possessed before. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," Bennett told Nathan during their daily briefing. "But 90 ships is a lot. Even with our improvements, the odds aren't good." "They weren't good last time either," Nathan replied. He looked older now, the stress of leading humanity through existential crisis aging him visibly. "But we won. We'll win again. Mr. President, I'm a military officer. I deal in realistic assessments. If we fight defensively again, we'll lose. They know our tactics now. They'll adapt." "Then what do you recommend?" Bennett pulled up a tactical display showing the Zerthak fleet's approach route. "We take the fight to them. Hit them before they reach the inner system. Use our faster-than-light ships to conduct raids, disrupting their formation, creating chaos. Make them fight on our terms instead of theirs." Nathan studied the plan, understanding the risk. It meant sending ships deep into enemy territory, beyond support, beyond reinforcement. If things went wrong, those ships would be lost with no way to escape. "Do it," he said. "Whatever it takes to keep Mars safe. To keep Earth safe. Do it." Across the solar system, warriors prepared for battle. Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral after Bennett took overall command, trained his crew for deep space combat. They ran simulations constantly, preparing for every scenario they could imagine. Maya transformed her medical facilities again, this time creating modular units that could be deployed directly to battle zones. She trained field medics from both species, teaching humans Velkar physiology and Velkar humans anatomy. Death wouldn't care about species. Her job was to fight death wherever it appeared. Kelris commanded a mixed squadron of human and Velkar ships. The Velkar vessels were still civilian at heart, but they had been armed with human weapons crewed by volunteers who wanted to fight for their adopted home. Kelris wore a human military uniform now, modified for his physiology, a symbol of integration between species. Thessix worked on the experimental ships, installing faster-than-light drives, teaching human engineers how to maintain them. He worked 18-hour days, driving himself to exhaustion, fueled by grief and determination. Danny's sacrifice would mean something. He would make sure of it. The Zerthak fleet entered the outer solar system 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Apparently, the Dominion was eager to finish this war. 90 ships arranged in 3 distinct formations, each capable of operating independently. They had learned from their defeat. No more concentrated targets. No more predictable tactics. Admiral Bennett watched them come and smiled coldly. They adapted. Good. So did we. She activated Operation Iron Storm, the offensive plan designed to bleed the Zerthak before they reached Mars. 3 faster-than-light capable ships jumped into the middle of the alien fleet, appearing without warning, launching everything they carried, then jumping away before the Zerthak could respond. The surprise attack destroyed 2 ships and damaged 3 more before the aliens even understood what happened. The Zerthak fleet scattered, formations breaking as commanders tried to defend against an enemy that could appear anywhere. Jake led the second wave, conventional ships attacking from multiple vectors. The Zerthak shields held against most attacks, but the sheer volume of fire overwhelmed their point defenses. More ships took damage. None were destroyed in this wave, but the steady degradation of Zerthak capabilities was the goal. War Master Krell, or rather his replacement, a younger, more aggressive officer named Vrax, refused to be drawn into piecemeal battles. He ordered the fleet to continue toward Mars, accepting losses as the price of reaching their objective. Once they destroyed the colony, human morale would break. Without the Velkar to protect, humans would surrender. That was Dominion thinking. They still didn't understand humanity. The running battle lasted 3 days as the Zerthak fleet pushed toward the inner system. Human ships harassed them constantly, using hit-and-run tactics, never engaging directly, always retreating before overwhelming force could be brought to bear. It was exhausting for both sides. Crews went without sleep. Systems ran to failure points. But the bleeding continued. By the time the Zerthak reached Jupiter, they had lost 15 ships. Not enough to stop them, but enough to make them cautious, enough to make them angry. The final battle was fought in Jupiter's gravity well among its many moons in the radiation belts that made sensors unreliable. Admiral Bennett had chosen the battlefield carefully. Here, human mobility mattered more than Zerthak firepower. Here, knowledge of local conditions provided advantage. The human fleet attacked in 3 coordinated waves, each targeting specific formation elements. The first wave, led by Jake, drew Zerthak fire and revealed defensive patterns. The second wave, commanded by Kelris and his mixed human Velkar squadron, exploited those patterns with precision strikes. The third wave, the faster-than-light ships, finished disabled vessels with ruthless efficiency. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was the culmination of everything humanity had learned about waging war in space against superior opponents. Use mobility. Use terrain. Use every advantage, no matter how small. And never, ever fight fair. The Zerthak fought back with desperate fury. They were trapped in an environment that negated many of their advantages, surrounded by an enemy that refused to stand still long enough to be destroyed. But they were still the Dominion. Still warriors of an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Kelris's flagship took a direct hit that shattered the port side. The Velkar commander found himself floating in vacuum, his suit breached, dying. A human rescue shuttle risked enemy fire to reach him, dragging him aboard, patching his suit, saving his life. Why? Kelris asked the human medic working on him. Because you're one of us, the medic replied simply, as if the answer was obvious. Thesix piloted one of the experimental ships, using the faster-than-light drive Danny had helped create. Each jump brought him into close range with Zerthak vessels. Each time he fired, he thought of his friend. Each enemy ship that died was justice for Danny's sacrifice. Maya worked in a medical frigate that jumped between battle zones, treating casualties from both sides. Human and Velkar wounded lay side by side in her trauma center, receiving the same care, the same desperate attempts to keep them alive. War didn't care about species. Neither did medicine. Admiral Bennett coordinated the chaos from her flagship, watching the tactical display, making split-second decisions that determined who lived and died. She had lost count of the ships destroyed, the casualties mounting. But the Zerthak fleet was breaking. Their formation had collapsed. Their morale was cracking. Commander Vrax realized his mistake too late. He had pushed for Mars with single-minded determination, ignoring the losses, confident that Dominion superiority would prevail. Now his fleet was scattered, damaged, surrounded by an enemy that fought like demons. His flagship was cornered by 3 human destroyers and Kelris's surviving squadron. The Velkar commander's voice came over the communication channel, speaking in heavily accented but clear Zerthak. You destroyed my homeworld, killed 15 billion of my people, followed us across the stars to finish what you started, but you found something you didn't expect. You found humanity, and humanity doesn't